Taoism. To understand the world, stop trying to control it. That's what Taoism is all about. Taoism is one of the most influential philosophies and spiritual traditions in human history. And yet for many of us, especially those outside of East Asia, it remains little more than a vague New Age buzzword. So what is Taoism actually all about? What can it teach us about ourselves and our relationship with the world? And why should we care? Our journey into Taoism begins with one of its founding figures, Laozi, also known as Lao Tzu or Old Master. Legend has it that he was an old wise man who lived in a cave in the mountains and wrote down his thoughts on life in a book called the Tao Te Ching, which literally translates as the Book of the Way. Now, while this is a nice story, there's no historical evidence that any one person named Laozi wrote the Tao Te Ching. The book's title, Tao Te Ching, is itself a mistranslation. The original title, simply Tao, means the way. And so, the book is better translated as the Way of the Tao. Regardless of whether Laozi was a real historical figure or just a mythical ideal, he is credited with originating the philosophical school of thought that would become Taoism. And he did this by writing down what are now some of the most beautiful and insightful passages ever written about the human condition and our place in the universe. Laozi wrote the Tao Te Ching sometime around the 6th century BCE in China, a time and place that would give rise to other great thinkers like Confucius. In fact, early Taoism was sometimes called Confucianism, minus, as in without. Laozi recognized the importance of society and morality, but ultimately valued freedom and spontaneity over rules and rituals. For Laozi, the ultimate concern was living in harmony with the Tao, which literally means the way, but can also be translated as the path. The truth, the source, nature, the universe, the absolute, or even God. Tao, with a capital D, is the underlying reality that governs all things. It's the eternal, unchanging principle that gives rise to and sustains the universe. In short, the Tao is everything, and everything is in the Tao. Since the Tao encompasses all things, it follows that it must be perfectly balanced. But how can infinite be balanced? How can everything be in everything? By the interplay of opposites. Laozi uses many metaphors to describe the Tao, such as water or heaven and earth. But perhaps the most helpful metaphor for understanding the Tao is that of a circle. Imagine a circle, infinitely expanding and contracting, always changing but never ending. This is the Tao, the eternal cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, expansion and contraction, effort and relaxation. Nothing is ever still because everything is in constant flux. Even what appears to be stillness, like the surface of a calm lake, is really just a state of dynamic equilibrium, a temporary pause in the ceaseless flow of change. This means that nothing is inherently good or bad, beautiful or ugly, strong or weak. These are all relative judgments based on our perspective, our position in the cycle. According to Laozi, we can find peace and fulfillment by letting go of our attachments and desires, by abandoning our futile attempts to grasp at what is impermanent. To do this, we need only follow the example of the natural world. If we observe the natural world carefully, we will see that every phenomenon, every event, is perfectly as it should be. The river does not try to become something other than a river, it simply flows. The mountain does not try to become something other than a mountain, it simply stands. The Tao of the river is to flow. The Tao of the mountain is to stand. The Tao of each thing is simply that thing being itself. Each thing in the universe does what comes naturally. It acts spontaneously, effortlessly, without trying. This effortless action is called Wu Wei, which literally means non-action, but is often misunderstood as inaction. Wu Wei is not a lack of action. It is rather a particular way of acting, namely in accordance with the Tao. The Tao that can be acted upon is not the whole Tao. Just as water flows differently in different situations, so too must we adapt our actions according to circumstances. In fact, Laozi says, be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way of the world. There is nothing better than being what you are. Following one's Tao can lead to a kind of inner peace. In contentment, a deep satisfaction with life that comes from doing one as best and then letting go of the results. Of course, this is easier said than done. Humans tend to overthink things and put way too much effort into everything. But when we simplify our lives and lighten our burdens, when we learn to relax and go with the flow, we open ourselves up to the possibility of experiencing the world in a new way. We can begin to see the beauty and wonder all around us. We can appreciate the interconnectedness of all things. We can discover the harmony and balance that exists within ourselves and in nature. We can find joy in the simple things and contentment with what we have. And we can live lives that are more authentic, more meaningful, more compassionate. In addition to the concept of wu-wei, another key idea in Taoism is the interaction between two seemingly opposite forces, yin and yang. Everything in the universe can be described as having both yin and yang aspects. Yin is associated with darkness, cold, earth, the moon, femininity, and passivity. Yang, on the other hand, is associated with light, heat, sky, the sun, masculinity, and activity. Yin and yang are complementary forces that need and depend on one another. Without darkness, we could not see the light. Without cold, we could not feel the warmth. Without the moon, we would have no tides. Without the sun, we would freeze to death. Without women, we could not reproduce. Without men, we could not protect and provide for our families. Yin and yang are interdependent and inseparable. They are two sides of the same coin, two poles of the same magnet. They are complementary opposites. The goal is to achieve harmony between the two, to live in balance with them. In the natural world, we see countless examples of yin and yang in perfect balance. The waxing and waning of the moon, the cycle of day and night, the changing of the seasons, the ebb and flow of the tides, the growth and decay of all living things. In ourselves, we also have both yin and yang aspects. Men have both masculine and feminine qualities. Women have both active and passive qualities. No one is purely yin or yang. We all have both. And it's when we integrate our yin and yang, when we harmonize our inner opposites, that we become whole, healthy individuals. Laozi says the highest good is like water, nourishing all things without expectation. It is like the Tao, which is always present but cannot be grasped. The key to living a good life, according to Laozi, is to be like water. Water nourishes all things without expecting anything in return. It simply gives and gives and gives, and yet there is always more where that came from. This is the essence of Taoism, a way of living that is centered on harmony with the Tao, balance between yin and yang, and effortless action, wu-wei. Today, Taoism continues to thrive in East Asia and beyond. Its influence can be seen in art, medicine, architecture, garden design, martial arts, and many other areas of human endeavor. Perhaps most famously, Taoism inspired the development of Tai Chi and Qigong. It's two traditional Chinese practices that emphasize balance, harmony, and the cultivation of vital energy. Taoist philosophy also had a profound impact on Chinese medicine, which views the body as a microcosm of the universe and seeks to restore balance and harmony to the flow of qi, or vital energy. In fact, Qigong exercises are often used in conjunction with acupuncture treatments to enhance their effectiveness. Additionally, Taoist principles are often incorporated into the practice of acupuncture, which aims to balance the flow of qi, or vital energy, throughout the body. By inserting thin needles at specific points on the body, acupuncturists can stimulate the flow of qi and promote healing. Furthermore, the balance of yin and yang is a central concept in traditional Chinese medicine, as well as in Taoist philosophy. According to this view, health and well-being are achieved when there is a harmonious balance between these two opposing yet complementary forces. When yin and yang are out of balance, however, illness and disease may result. Therefore, one of the goals of traditional Chinese medicine is to help patients restore balance between their yin and yang. Lastly, Taoist ideas about wu-wei, or effortless action, can be found in various art forms, including traditional Chinese painting. Taoist painters sought to capture the natural world in a spontaneous and non-contrived manner, allowing the brush to flow and the colors to blend naturally on the canvas. This approach to painting reflected a deep sense of harmony with the Tao, or natural order of the universe. In a world that often feels chaotic and out of control, Taoism offers a refreshing perspective. It reminds us to slow down, to simplify our lives, to connect with nature, and to let go of our attachments. In doing so, we can find a deep sense of peace and contentment that is possible in the midst of life's challenges. Buddhism. Life is suffering, but there is a way out. This is what Buddhism teaches. It's one of the largest religions in the world, but its teachings have inspired people of all faiths, or no faith at all. So let's talk about Buddhism. We'll be looking at the big questions each tradition grapples with, such as what is the meaning of life? Is there a God? What happens when we die? And how should we live our lives? Today we're going to look at Buddhism, which began over 2,500 years ago in 5th century BCE, India. The person we have to start with is Siddhartha Gautama, who became known as the Buddha. The word Buddha means the awakened one. So why was he awakened? Well, the story goes that while he was meditating under the Bodhi tree, he suddenly realized the nature of reality and became enlightened. Now before this, he had lived a sheltered life, cushioned from pain and suffering. But after this experience, he went out into the world and taught others what he learned. That's the short version anyway. There are lots of stories and details that people have added over the centuries, so what did he teach? First, he taught the Four Noble Truths. The first truth is that life is suffering. Think about it. Everything we love eventually ends. People die. The weather outside is either too hot or too cold. We get sick, etc. The second truth is that the reason we suffer is because we grasp at things and cling to them so tightly. When things change or fall away, we're caught off guard and then we suffer. The third truth is that if we stop clinging to things, then we will stop suffering. And the fourth truth is the path to letting go, and therefore, ending suffering is called the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path consists of 8 practices that cover various aspects of life. There's right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Basically, this path is about living a moral and mindful life. It's not about rituals or sacrifices or going to church, although those things can help. Instead, it's about training your mind. In fact, the whole of Buddhism is about training your mind. For example, one of the key ideas is seeing things as they really are, not as we would like them to be. For instance, if we see someone who has treated us badly, it's easy to get caught up in anger and resentment. But Buddhism encourages us to look more deeply. Can anger and resentment really make things better? Will they bring back the person who has wronged us? Probably not. And now that we're angry and resentful, we've lost peace of mind. So the Buddhist approach is to accept the situation and then try to do good for ourselves and others. Another idea is non-attachment. Do you know how the saying goes? If you love something, you must let it go. Sometimes we hold on so tightly to things because we're afraid of losing them. We might worry that if we let go of our job, we'll lose financial security. So we keep working, even though we hate it. Or maybe we cling to a relationship that brings us more pain than joy because we're scared of being alone. These are extreme examples, but I think we can all relate to holding on to things that don't make us happy. So the Buddhist path invites us to become aware of when we're doing this, to notice that we're scared of losing something, and to face that fear. When we do this, we free ourselves and the other person involved. Think about it. If you're in a relationship that isn't making you happy, clinging to it causes you and the other person pain. But if you let go, you both have the opportunity to find happiness elsewhere. Now, Buddhism also talks about karma. It doesn't mean the same thing in Buddhism as it does in Hinduism, rather than an action that determines whether you're born as a human, an animal, a god, etc. Karma refers to the consequences of our actions. Good actions create good karma, bad actions create bad karma. So if you treat others well, then good things will happen to you. Not necessarily in this life, but possibly in a future life. You see, Buddhists believe in rebirth, not an afterlife. When someone dies, their consciousness moves on to a new body. How and why this happens is explained by the law of dependent origination. This says that everything in the universe depends on something else for existence. Nothing exists independently. Therefore, our mental states depend on past mental states and physical states. Our current body depends on past bodies and future bodies, so on. So death is not the end, but it's also not a beginning in the traditional sense. Okay, so where does God fit into all of this? Well, he doesn't. Buddhism is actually considered an atheistic religion. Some Buddhists pray to gods, but they see these as simply helpful beings who have achieved a higher state of enlightenment than they have. In some ways, Buddhism is similar to Stoicism in that neither has a god, and both emphasize accepting things as they are and controlling your reactions to events. One more term I want to define before we go is nirvana. This is often translated as enlightenment or awakening, but really it's indescribable. Think about how hard it is to explain colors to someone who has been blind their whole life. They may understand the concept of color and know that there are different colors, but they have no idea what red or blue looks like. Similarly, nirvana is beyond our current understanding. The best we can do is point to it and say that's what we want. We want to stop suffering. We want to be free. To sum it all up, Buddhism is about training the mind to overcome suffering and reach nirvana. It's about self-reflection and self-improvement, not ritual or rules. Okay, that's what Buddhism teaches. But what does it look like in practice? Well, let me share 3 striking images that come to mind when I hear the word Buddhism. The first image is of ancient temples nestled in the side of a mountain. Having visited several Buddhist temples around the world, I'm always struck by their beauty and tranquility. They're usually tucked away in quiet places, far from the hustle and bustle of city life. As I walk through the temple, I feel my own hectic thoughts gradually slowing down. The ornate carvings seem to tell ancient stories, yet they also speak to something deep within me. I think it's a place of stillness and reflection. My second image is of monks in saffron robes walking slowly and deliberately down a path. I think of the discipline and dedication it takes to live the life of a monk, to leave behind family and friends and possessions to seek enlightenment. I imagine what it must be like to commit fully to this path, to dedicate every moment to meditation and service. And my third image is of a monk sitting in meditation, eyes closed, hands resting on his lap. Meditation is such a powerful tool to calm the mind and connect with something greater than ourselves. As I watch him, I feel a sense of peace and calm wash over me. I am reminded of the importance of taking time to pause and reflect amidst the chaos of daily life. I think these images capture the essence of Buddhism, a journey inward, a quest for peace, and a dedication to helping others along the way. So what about today? How is Buddhism relevant to us today? Well, first, the practice of mindfulness, which originated in Buddhism, is now used by therapists to help people deal with anxiety and depression. By focusing on the present moment without judgment, we can detach from negative thoughts and emotions. Second, ideas like non-attachment and letting go can help us break free from destructive behaviors and patterns. We don't need to hold on to every hurt or resentment. We can choose to forgive and move forward. Finally, the emphasis on inner peace and self-reflection is more relevant than ever in our fast-paced, hyper-connected world. We constantly bombarded with distractions, and it can be challenging to find stillness amidst the noise. But perhaps that's exactly what we need to do. Maybe the answers we seek are within us all along. Hey, there's so much more to explore in Buddhism, and I encourage you to continue learning about it. We've only scratched the surface here. Confucianism. One man's words shaped a civilization for over 2,000 years. We're going to tell you about one such man today, and his name was Confucius. His teachings were the bedrock of Chinese society for centuries, shaping its art, science, literature, and life. And although he lived over 2,000 years ago, his impact is still felt in many parts of Asia today. But who was this mysterious sage, and why should you care? Seen 6th century BCE, China. The spring and autumn period, a time when China was not unified but consisted of dozens of warring states. Society was in chaos, constantly at war. There was no peace. Enter Confucius, born in the state of Lu. He grew up hearing stories of an earlier age of peace and prosperity. As a young man, he vowed to restore that lost harmony by restoring traditional manners, customs, and values. Many rulers listened to his teachings, but Confucius died before he could see his philosophy take shape in the world. Fortunately, his students carried on his work and wrote down his words. They compiled them into a book called the Confucian Analects. This book became the backbone of Chinese culture for over 2,000 years. Let's break down some of the virtues Confucius taught, so that we can understand his wisdom better. We'll use an analogy to explain the virtue of Ren, which is usually translated as humaneness or benevolence. Imagine you're playing a game of basketball. You could just run around the court, grab the ball, and try to score point after point without helping anyone else on your team or even caring whether they scored or not. In fact, you could push them out of the way whenever you need to get closer to the basket. This kind of behavior might win you games, but it doesn't really reflect the virtue of Ren. Now imagine this. You're playing basketball again, except this time you pass the ball to your teammates, help them get open and celebrate when they score. Not only is this behavior more fun and enjoyable for everyone, it reflects the Confucian ideal of Ren, which involves treating others as you would like to be treated yourself. Did remember that Confucius didn't just have simple platitudes like, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. His ideas were far more nuanced than that. In fact, there are entire branches of Neo-Confucian philosophy devoted to exploring what it means to treat others as you would like to be treated. This idea is similar to the golden rule found in many religions and cultures, but it's also broader. Confucianism doesn't limit itself to religious ideas. Instead, it's a philosophy that can be applied by anyone, regardless of their beliefs. The next virtue is Li, which is usually translated as ritual propriety. But don't let the word propriety fool you. Li isn't just about being polite. It's about understanding the deeper meaning behind rituals and ceremonies. Think back to the last time you attended a wedding or a funeral. Did you notice that each event had its own special traditions and customs? At a wedding, there's usually lots of celebration and joy, while at a funeral, there's mourning and solemnity. These customs aren't just for show. They help us to remember important values and to connect with others who are going through the same experiences as us. In the same way, Confucian rituals are more than just empty ceremonies. They express important values and help people to live virtuously. For example, in the Confucian tradition, there's a special ceremony called the coming-of-age ceremony. It's a ritual that marks the transition from childhood to adulthood. During this ceremony, young people make a commitment to live by the Confucian virtues and to contribute to the well-being of their community. Moving on to our third virtue, Zhao, which is usually translated as filial piety. If you ever had a parent or grandparent, then you know how important they are in your life. They taught you how to walk and talk, gave you advice when you were struggling, and loved you unconditionally. In Confucianism, Zhao is the virtue of treating one's parents and ancestors with respect and care. But it's not just about being nice to your parents. It's about following their rules and listening to their advice, even when you don't agree with them. Of course, it's important to be respectful towards your parents, but it's equally important to be honest and open with them. That's why Confucius said, be slow to anger, but when you are angry, be slow to stop. By practicing Zhao, we learn how to be responsible, caring, and respectful members of our community. Now that you know some of the core virtues of Confucianism, let's talk about how they apply to real life. When we follow these virtues, we create harmony in our relationships and in our communities, but sometimes it can be hard to do the right thing. That's where Li comes in. Li refers to the rituals and ceremonies that help us to follow the Confucian virtues. For example, when someone has died, we might not feel like celebrating, but by following the rituals of mourning, we're able to express our grief and to honor the dead. In the same way, when someone has done something wrong, we might feel angry, but by following the rituals of confession and forgiveness, we're able to heal the broken relationship and move forward together. Finally, let's talk about the ultimate goal of Confucianism, which is achieving harmony. Harmony in Confucianism isn't just about feeling good or making everyone happy. It's about creating a world where people can live together in peace, and everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential. Confucius believed that this harmony could only be achieved when everyone followed the three core virtues of Confucianism, Ren, Li, and Zhao. By doing so, we create a virtuous cycle that leads to greater harmony in our relationships, in our communities, and ultimately in the world. But how does this ancient philosophy still survive in our modern world? How is it still relevant? Today, Confucian thought still shapes the way children are educated in East Asian countries like China, Japan, and Korea. For example, in China, the Confucian classics are part of the national curriculum and students are taught to follow the example of the sages of old. Moreover, Confucian ideals are also reflected in the way that many businesses and organizations are run. For example, the emphasis on hierarchy and respect for elders is a common feature of many East Asian companies. Additionally, Confucian values are also influencing politics in many parts of East Asia. For example, in Singapore, the government promotes Confucian values like justice and harmony as part of its national identity. And in Taiwan, many politicians draw on Confucian traditions to justify their policies. Furthermore, Confucian ideas are also having an impact on the way that people live their everyday lives in East Asia. For example, the emphasis on family and community is reflected in the popularity of group activities and social organizations. And the emphasis on personal growth and self-improvement is reflected in the popularity of self-help books and seminars. Although Confucianism originated in China, its influence has spread far beyond its original context. In fact, Confucian ideas can be found in many different cultures and societies around the world. For example, the emphasis on ethics and morality is found in many religions and philosophies. And the emphasis on education and self-improvement is found in many individualistic cultures. Even though Confucianism has been adapted and reinterpreted in different cultures, it has remained true to its core values of ethics, education, family, and ritual. Cynicism. If you're anything like me, you've been sold a bunch of things that you don't need. New phone, spare parts, crypto courses, protein powder, noise-canceling headphones, band tickets, avocado toast. And there are people who would be perfectly fine with you never buying any of these things, but then there are people who would be very upset if you didn't buy them because they make money off you buying those things. And this makes it hard to know what you actually want. Are my jeans really out of style? Do I need this medication? Is it okay that I never go outside anymore? What do I actually believe? We've all grown up questioning things we were told to believe in order to be good little consumers, which is why today we're going to talk about cynicism. Before I get to that, first we have to talk about cynicism. If you're anything like me, when you heard the word cynicism, you immediately thought of the type of person who thinks that nothing will ever go right, who doesn't trust anyone, who is always expecting the worst. But I'm hoping by the end of this episode, you'll have at least two definitions of the word, both of which we'll discuss in relation to one man. The ancient Greek philosopher Diogenes of Sinope, aka the original dropout, aka the OG cynic. Diogenes was born around 412 BCE in the city of Sinope on the Black Sea coast, which is now part of Turkey. His dad was a merchant who made money selling purple dye to the Persians, and apparently he got caught smuggling something and then got put to death. So when Diogenes was 8 years old, his dad was executed, and his mom moved to Athens, where she married a goldsmith. Diogenes grew up and became a philosopher, which was basically a profession back then. It's not like he went to university and then was like, oh, I guess I'm a philosopher now. He just kind of showed up and did it. But soon enough he created his own school of philosophy called Cynicism, which is derived from the Greek word for dog and can be translated into English as meaning both independent and savage. The story goes that after leaving home at 19, Diogenes lived a life of extreme minimalism. Wearing only the cloak he had been given at birth and carrying a staff in a small bag, he turned his back on material possessions, including clothing, a bed, chair, or table, which he rejected as unnecessary luxuries, as well as the comforts of love and friendship. He chose instead to spend his time wandering around the streets of Athens and doing whatever he felt like, which often included taunting people, including other philosophers, which annoyed them so much that they wanted him dead. In fact, he pissed so many people off that one time he decided to move to a different part of town, and the people there also got pissed off, because he made a mess by living there, so they brought him to court, and he ended up getting sentenced to exile. But Diogenes was like, cool, that's exactly what I was planning on doing anyway. He spent his later years traveling around Greece, visiting places like the island of Melos, the Italian colony of Cumae, and the court of King Attalus III in Pergamon, but mostly staying true to himself, which included, among other things, sleeping in a barrel, begging for food, stealing food, having a public disagreement with Alexander the Great, and pissing off a lot of people. It might seem weird to us now, but back then, philosophers weren't just some smart guys sitting in a tweed jacket talking about stuff. They were supposed to be role models who actually walked the walk and not just talked the talk. They were supposed to exhibit their philosophical ideals in everyday life. And Diogenes took this ideal to such an extreme that you could say that he was the world's first YouTuber. But before we get to what Diogenes taught, there's another thing that we need to define first. When Diogenes used the word cynic, he wasn't referring to the type of person who is always expecting the worst. Instead, he was referring to the type of person who is independent of conventional behavior. The core idea of his philosophy was that, in order to become happy, we need to live according to nature, not convention. As Diogenes saw it, almost all of our wants and needs are a result of social convention, rather than natural law. Everything from the clothes we wear to the food we eat to the way we carry ourselves has been determined by the rules of society rather than by nature. And this includes things like shame, fear, and desire. When Diogenes was criticized for not following conventional morality, he said that he was being moral in a manner of speaking, that he was actually practicing a higher form of morality. Conventional morality is based on social convention. It's based on our upbringing and our environment and our relationships. And as such, it can differ from person to person. That's why one culture considers eating cows immoral and another doesn't care. That's why one family is okay with you dating and another isn't. That's why one group of friends smokes weed together and another hates weed. And while Diogenes believed that conventional morality could be decent sometimes, he believed that its variability showed that it couldn't be truly moral. Nature, on the other hand, is universal. It's objective, doesn't change from person to person. According to Diogenes, the human nature of humans is immortal, self-sufficient, and free. Therefore, he argued that we should let nature, not convention, determine our actions. According to Diogenes, we were born free, but then we voluntarily gave up our freedom by agreeing with certain social conventions. For example, we agree that it's shameful to be naked, so we cover up. Or we agree that it's shameful to beg for food, so we find a job. Or we agree that it's shameful to sleep outside, so we build houses. And once we agree to these conventions, we lose our freedom. Now, it's important to note that Diogenes wasn't trying to reject society or even improve it. He just wanted to live his own life in his own way. Most of his challenges to social norms weren't political in nature. He didn't start a movement or write books or articles or debate other philosophers. He just did his own thing, but his actions still challenged the status quo. By sleeping outside, he was showing that homes weren't actually necessary. By begging for food, he was showing that jobs weren't actually necessary. And by taunting everyone, he was showing that social niceties weren't actually necessary. And this is why he pissed everyone off. But it's also why his philosophy appealed to some people, particularly women. Diogenes was known for having many female students, including one named Eurete, who was considered to be so attractive that the philosopher Plato wrote an entire dialogue about her. Anyway, fast forward a couple thousand years to 1930s America. There was a professor at Reed College named Epictetus who taught a course called Introduction to Cynicism. In it, he encouraged his students to reject the materialism and consumerism of modern life, and to focus instead on living a virtuous life of independence and simplicity. And it just so happens that these are the exact same things that Diogenes was teaching in ancient Greece. And this is the second definition of cynicism that we need to discuss today, the philosophy of anti-consumerism. Now, before you label all anti-consumerist people as cynics, it's important to remember that not all cynics are anti-consumerist, just like not all people who don't eat meat are vegans. But generally speaking, the philosophy of anti-consumerism does share a lot of similarities with Stoicism, specifically in the sense that it values inner peace over outer appearances. The Stoics believe that we should undwell too much on the opinions of others, because what matters most is what we think of ourselves. And the anti-consumerist movement shares this value. By rejecting consumerism, anti-consumerists seek to remove themselves from the constant pressure to acquire more stuff. By simplifying their lives and focusing on experiences rather than objects, they seek to find happiness from within, rather than from the approval of others. Of course, there's a bit of a difference between wanting to be financially independent and despising capitalism, and being homeless and despising hygiene. But both movements do tend to attract the same types of people, namely people who are looking for authenticity, who are sick of being sold things that they do and need, and who want to live according to their own values rather than those of society. And in some cases, both movements also attract the same types of critics, namely people who benefit from the status quo, namely people who make money by convincing others to buy things they don't need. So yeah, next time someone tries to sell you something that you don't need, you can either pretend that you read Diogenes and ask them what's in it for them, or you can pretend that you read an anti-consumerist and tell them that you read not buying into it. Both work pretty well, just don't do it for the same reason. Epicureanism. I've got some news for you. You are not allowed to be happy. Happiness is selfish and self-indulgent, and those who seek it after it are doomed to fail. And so says our friend Epicurus, one of history's great philosophers of happiness. Born in 341 BC in Greece, Epicurus was born into an age of turmoil. Alexander the Great had kicked the bucket. His empire split in half and Greece had descended into civil war. And thus, at a young age, Epicurus goes to live with his grandfather in Athens, and here he found his own philosophical school, the garden. Why the garden? Well, because his house looked like a garden, I guess. Or maybe because in the garden you can enjoy the beauty of nature and get all zen. Or maybe because gardens are a place of fruitful labor. In any case, it was in this humble garden that Epicurus would teach many of the ideas that would make him famous. We don't have any photos of him because photography hadn't been invented yet. But this is what he probably looked like. It kind of looks like Freddie Mercury if Freddie Mercury had a stroke. And so, my little philosopher friends, let's take a walk in the garden and see what Epicurus has to teach us. There's a lot of misconceptions about Epicureanism because of its reputation for hedonism. When people think of Epicurus, they usually think of a fat man lying on a couch eating grapes and having sex with a donkey. And sure, why not? But this popular conception of Epicurus misses the point. For Epicurus, pleasure is not about excess and indulgence, but about freedom from fear. He called this atareusia, which literally just means freedom from pain. But more than that, Epicurus argued that we can achieve a kind of mental serenity by understanding how to correctly pursue pleasure and avoid pain. This is what he called, which might look like a Greek version of haig, cozy, sober, and stable pleasure. So now you're probably thinking, okay, so this sounds all very well, but how do I achieve this state of mental tranquility? The answer, according to Epicurus, is to stop wanting things that we don't need. Epicurus believed that the majority of our desires are useless and lead only to frustration. And so to reach ataraxia, we must learn to distinguish between what we really need and what we don't. When we understand this, we will no longer suffer from the pain of desire and attain peace of mind. So to sum up, the first step in Epicurus's philosophy is to stop desiring things. Pretty simple, right? See, I knew you could learn philosophy. But while avoiding useless desires is important, Epicurus also thought that certain desires are crucial for our well-being. Above all, friendship. According to Epicurus, friendship is the source of all goodness in life and the foundation of our well-being. Epicurus argued that the chief aim in life should be to acquire friends, which seems quite reasonable. Who doesn't want friends? But then he goes and spoils it by adding that these friends better not be the sort that backstab you when you're trying to do something cool. Now, when it comes to friendship, there's a bit of a tension in Epicurus's thought. On the one hand, he said that we shouldn't form attachments, because attachments lead to pain when they're lost. But on the other hand, he said that friendship is the greatest good in life. So how do we square this circle? Well, I think the answer lies in the type of friendships we cultivate. According to Epicurus, true friendship can only exist between equals. And so we should seek out friends who challenge and inspire us to be better people, not people who are clingy and needy. That way we never lose them. Okay? Bad joke? But in all seriousness, true friendship can only flourish when we are truly free. And this is where Epicurus's philosophy gets interesting. You see, Epicurus wasn't just a philosopher of happiness, he was also a philosopher of politics. And his political philosophy was anarchist. He believed that the state was an artificial construct that oppressed the natural freedom of individuals. And so he urged his followers to withdraw from political life and live self-sufficiently in the city, hence the name, City Dionysia. But hold on a minute. If Epicurus believed that the state was oppressive and that most desire is futile, then doesn't that mean that he wanted people to stop caring about the world? Well, yes, in a way, but this idea has been misunderstood. People think that Epicurus was some kind of proto-hippie who advocated doing nothing, but this is not the case. For Epicurus, achieving ataraxia is not about withdrawing from the world, but about changing the way we relate to it. Epicurus was a firm believer in the power of knowledge and thought that philosophy could change the world. And so his idea of ataraxia is not some kind of escapist fantasy, but a call to action. By attaining inner peace, we become better equipped to deal with the challenges of life and make positive changes in the world around us. So you might be thinking, this all sounds very nice, but how does it actually work? How does one attain this mental tranquility that Epicurus talks about? Well, there are 4 steps to getting there, my philosopher friends, and we'll tell you what they are right after. For those of you who are new here, welcome. Here we bring you all the wisdom of the ages in 4 minutes or less. Now back to our program. The second step in Epicurus's philosophy is to focus on the present moment. One of the biggest problems we face in life is that we always thinking about the future or dwelling on the past. But according to Epicurus, the only thing we have control over is the present moment. And so if we want to be happy, we must focus our attention on the here and now. But hold on a minute. What about memories or hopes for the future? Don't those also contribute to our overall happiness? Well, yes, of course. But according to Epicurus, we must learn to distinguish between what we can control and what we can't. Our memories and our hopes may seem real, but they're ultimately illusions. They're not part of the present moment, and therefore we cannot control them. And so if we want to be happy, we must focus on what we can control and let go of what we can't. This might sound simple, but it's actually quite difficult. But when we learn to do it, we attain the mental serenity that Epicurus talks about. Step 3. Put things in perspective. According to Epicurus, we often give too much weight to things that don't really matter. We get upset over small things and ignore the big picture. But Epicurus teaches us that we must learn to put things in perspective. When we do this, we realize that most of our worries are unfounded, and that we should not give them so much attention. Epicurus talked about this in his letter from a friend to Menicius, where he gives advice to his student on how to deal with grief. He says, "You must consider how transient all worldly things are, and how everything will change. Even the gods themselves cannot change the nature of things, nor can they alter the past or the future. But everything is subject to change, both what has happened and what will happen." So remember, my little philosopher friends, when things get tough, just remember that everything is temporary. Nothing lasts forever, not even your bad mood. Step 4. Practice gratitude. According to Epicurus, the key to happiness is to be grateful for what we have. Rather than envious of what others have, gratitude is a powerful emotion that can help us focus on the positive aspects of our lives and ignore the negative ones. Epicurus believed that we should cultivate gratitude for the small things in life, like a sunny day or a good meal, as well as the big things, like our health or our loved ones. When we practice gratitude, we start to appreciate all the good things in our lives, and we become less likely to envy others. Platonism. What if everything you see is just a shadow of reality? What if there's a deeper, more profound truth hidden behind the veil of our physical world? Welcome to my channel. Today, we're diving deep into Platonism, a philosophy that will challenge everything you know and make you question the very essence of reality. Join me on this mind-bending journey as we explore the profound teachings of Plato and uncover the secrets of Platonism. Our story begins in the heart of ancient Athens, a place where ideas were born and legends were made. Here, amidst the bustling marketplace and the grand temple of Athena, there lived a man who would change the course of human thought forever. Plato, born into a wealthy and influential family in 428 BC. Plato's life was marked by tragedy from the start. The death of his grandfather, a close friend of the great statesman, Pericles, deeply affected him, as did the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, which claimed the lives of many Athenians, including Plato's uncle and several of his close friends. These early experiences ignited a passion for justice and a thirst for knowledge that would drive him throughout his life. At the age of 18, he began to study philosophy under the renowned Athenian philosopher Socrates, whose teachings would have a profound impact on his intellectual development. After Socrates' unjust execution in 399 BC, Plato traveled extensively, seeking wisdom and understanding from various schools of thought. He visited Egypt, where he studied mathematics and astronomy, and returned to Athens around 387 BC to establish his own philosophical academy, which quickly became a center of intellectual activity. It was here that Plato developed his own philosophical system, which he named Platonism. And it was here also that he penned some of his most famous works, including the Republic Symposium and Phaedo, laying the groundwork for Western philosophy and shaping the course of intellectual history. So what exactly was Platonism all about? Let's dive into the core of this fascinating philosophy and discover what makes it so unique. Platonism, founded by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, is a school of thought that has had a profound impact on Western philosophy and beyond. At its core, Platonism centers around the concept of the world of forms, a realm of perfect, eternal, and invisible truths that exist beyond our physical world. According to Plato, our physical world is just a glimpse of something greater, and it is through reason and contemplation that we can access the world of forms and attain true knowledge and understanding. One of the most famous examples of Plato's philosophy is the Allegory of the cave. Imagine a group of people who have lived their entire lives chained up in a cave. All they have ever seen are the shadows cast by objects placed in front of them, and they believe these shadows to be the only reality. One person escapes the cave and upon seeing the outside world, realizes the shadows were merely copies of the real objects. He returns to the cave to share his discovery, but the other prisoners, unable to comprehend the concept of a world beyond the cave, mock and reject him. This allegory illustrates Plato's belief that our physical world is like the cave, and that our senses can only perceive the shadows or appearances of things. True reality, according to Plato, lies in the world of forms, which can only be accessed through reason and the soul. To understand Platonism, we must first delve into Plato's concept of the soul. Plato believed that the soul is immortal, and that it consists of three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. Reason represents our capacity for rational thought and contemplation, while the spirit embodies our emotions and desires. Appetite refers to our base instincts and physical needs. Plato believed that the ideal state is one in which the three parts of the soul are in harmony with each other. This tripartite division of the soul not only influenced Western psychology, but also provided the basis for Plato's political philosophy. In the Republic, Plato describes his vision for an ideal society, which he believed could be achieved when each class of citizens embodied the three parts of the soul. The guardians, or ruling class, were meant to be guided by reason, while the auxiliaries, or military class, would be driven by spirit. The producers, or commoners, would be motivated by appetite. Plato's concept of an ideal society, characterized by harmony and balance, has had a lasting impact on political thought and continues to inspire debates about the nature of justice and the best form of government. Furthermore, Plato's philosophy had a profound impact on the development of religion. His concept of the world of forms provided a philosophical basis for the idea of a transcendent reality, and his belief in the immortality of the soul influenced Christian theology. However, Platonism's influence was not limited to philosophy, religion, and politics. It also had a significant impact on science. Plato's emphasis on mathematics and his belief in the importance of studying the natural world laid the groundwork for the scientific method. His student, Aristotle, who founded the Lyceum, a center of intellectual activity in ancient Greece, further developed Plato's ideas and made significant contributions to various fields of knowledge, including biology, physics, and astronomy. Despite its wide-ranging influence, Platonism was not without its critics. In the 3rd century BC, the Stoics, a philosophical school founded by Zeno of Citium, challenged some of Plato's ideas, particularly his concept of the world of forms. The Stoics argued that true reality could only be found in the physical world, and that the pursuit of abstract ideals was a source of human suffering. Nevertheless, Platonism continued to thrive, and its influence can be seen in the works of later philosophers such as the Roman philosopher Cicero, who integrated Platonic ideas into his own philosophy. During the Renaissance, Platonism experienced a revival as thinkers such as Marsilio Ficino sought to reconcile Plato's philosophy with Christian theology. Ficino's translation of Plato's works into Latin made Platonism more accessible to Western scholars and helped to spark renewed interest in classical philosophy. As we continue our exploration of Platonism, it's essential to recognize that Plato's ideas were not static, but evolved throughout his philosophical career. Early Platonic philosophy, as seen in dialogues such as the Apology and Phaedo, reflects the influence of his mentor, Socrates, and focuses heavily on ethics and the search for wisdom. Later Platonic philosophy, exemplified by works like the Republic and the Laws, shows a greater interest in metaphysics, cosmology, and political theory. This evolution is evident in Plato's use of allegory and metaphor, which becomes more complex and nuanced over time. For instance, the allegory of the cave, first introduced in the Republic, is a powerful tool for explaining Plato's theory of knowledge and the importance of philosophical inquiry. However, In later dialogues such as Theaetetus, Plato further develops his theory of knowledge and introduces new concepts such as the distinction between knowledge and opinion. As we delve deeper into the world of Platonism, we encounter one of its key features: Plato's use of dialogue as a literary and philosophical tool. In fact, the word dialogue itself derives from the Greek word dialogos, meaning conversation, reflecting Plato's innovative approach to philosophical inquiry. Plato's dialogues, such as the Euthyphro, Meno, and Phaedo, are not merely records of actual conversations between Plato and his philosophical contemporaries, but are literary masterpieces in their own. Sophism. So what do you know about Sophism? If it's any consolation, neither did I until a few weeks ago. But now, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about it. So let's begin. What if truth doesn't exist? Never did. What if every belief we hold, every theory we swear is absolute, every opinion we think is self-evident, is really just someone's propaganda foisted on an unsuspecting public? If this sounds like a modern predicament, then perhaps that's because it is. But this was the argument of the Sophists, a group of itinerant intellectuals who lived in 5th century BCE Greece. Their name literally means wise men, or adroit men, from the Greek word sophia, which means wisdom or knowledge. And yet they were not philosophers in the way we understand the term today. They didn't care about metaphysical truths, or the nature of reality, or the ideal state. Instead, they focused on rhetoric, the art of persuasion, and taught others how to win arguments, no matter what side of the debate they were on. The Sophists were a peculiar bunch. Some of the most famous were Protagoras, who supposedly said man is the measure of all things; Gorgias, who claimed that even the real could be made unreal by the power of speech; and Hippias, who bragged that he could argue about anything, usually for a fee. To be fair, these teachers weren't necessarily charlatans. Many had once been students of the philosopher Socrates. But while Socrates sought wisdom and enlightenment, the Sophists pursued worldly success. They traveled around the Greek city-states, often acting as advisors to politicians, teaching the wealthy and powerful how to dominate the courts and councils of Athens. But what exactly were they teaching? Answers found in their most famous slogan: man is the measure of all things. In other words, there are no objective standards of truth, only opinions. Take, for example, the question of whether a chair is red or blue. The Sophists would have answered that it depends on the person looking at it. If someone says the chair is red, then it is. If someone else says the chair is blue, then it is. There is no absolute truth of the matter. Everything is relative, but this flies in the face of common sense. We normally assume that there is an external world that exists independently of our minds, that there are facts, and that some people are right while others are wrong. And that even if they didn't, we couldn't trust our reasoning since everyone reasons differently. The only thing we can be certain of is our own opinions. As Protagoras put it, I know that I know nothing. Surely, if there is no truth, then we can't know anything at all. So we can't even be sure that we're alive. This is where the Sophist's skill for rhetoric came into play. For rhetoric isn't just about winning an argument. It's also about making a convincing case. It's about framing an issue in such a way that it's difficult to disagree. And nowhere is this more apparent than in Gorgias' famous treatise called On the Nature of the Universe. In this piece, Gorgias takes his reader on a dizzying ride through a series of rhetorical questions. He asks, what is existence? What is non-existence? And what is the nature of reality? And to each of these questions, he gives 4 possible answers. Then he argues that we cannot know which one is true, if any, because our senses are untrustworthy and our reason is biased. Finally, he concludes that the only thing we can be certain of is that we can be certain of anything. Again, this seems absurd, but Gorgias wasn't trying to convince his audience that this conclusion was true. He was trying to convince them that it didn't matter whether or not it was true. After all, as Protagoras had said, man is the measure of all things. And so, Gorgias's rhetorical skill lay not in proving his point, but in making it impossible to disprove. He was showing off how his method of rhetoric could make almost any statement appear plausible, even if it was completely false. This led to a situation where the Sophists could claim to teach the path to wisdom. But instead, they were teaching people how to manipulate others. They were reducing the search for knowledge to a mere game of verbal one-upmanship. and it was a game that only those who were skilled enough to play it could win. Socrates wasn't a fan of this development, and he spent much of his career trying to expose the Sophists' tricks. The two were diametrically opposed in their goals and methods. Where the Sophists wanted to win arguments, Socrates sought to find the truth. Where the Sophists relied on rhetoric, Socrates valued logic and reason. Where the Sophists taught persuasive speaking, Socrates practiced rigorous questioning. But despite their differences, Socrates recognized the Sophists' skills, and he admired their ability to persuade people. In fact, he once told a friend that he wanted to be like the Sophists, except instead of teaching rhetoric to the highest bidder, he would teach it to anyone who wanted to learn. He knew that rhetoric was a powerful tool, and he didn't want to waste it. So instead of using it to win arguments, he used it to ask questions. Questions that forced his interlocutors to examine their beliefs and their arguments and their very understanding of the world. One of his most famous exchanges is with a man named Thrasymachus, who claimed that justice is nothing but the advantage of the stronger. Socrates asked him, "Then you don't think there is such a thing as injustice?" And when Thrasymachus replied, "Of course not," Socrates pressed him further, "So injustice is never punished?" "Well, yes it is," admitted Thrasymachus. "By whom is it punished?" "By those who are stronger," said Thrasymachus. "So the strong do punish injustice, even though it doesn't hurt them." "Of course not," said Thrasymachus. "It hurts those who are weaker." "And do you believe," asked Socrates, "that it's right for the strong to inflict pain on the weak simply because they can?" At this point, Thrasymachus realized that he was being trapped by his own definitions, and he angrily declared, "Enough of this cross-examination, I give up." In this dialogue, Socrates doesn't bother arguing that Thrasymachus is wrong. Instead, he asks questions that show Thrasymachus how his definition of justice is self-contradictory and absurd. And in doing so, he reveals the limits of sophistic rhetoric. Socrates recognizes that the Sophists are right that rhetoric can't prove anything, but he also knows that that doesn't mean it's useless. Rhetoric is still a valuable tool for getting people to think deeply and carefully about their beliefs. And so the Socratic method isn't just about finding the truth, it's also about asking the right questions. Unfortunately, Plato, who was Socrates' student, took this idea of asking the right questions to its logical extreme and imagined a perfect state where the guardians of society are philosophers, kings. In this ideal state, only those who have discovered the ultimate truth can lead the state. Now, although Plato clearly admired the Sophist rhetoric, he believed that they were ultimately misguided. He thought that their focus on persuasion rather than truth was dangerous, and that their skepticism about objective standards meant that they were undermining the foundations of society. And yet, Plato recognized that the Sophists had a point. Our senses can be deceptive, our reasoning is biased, and our opinions are always colored by our experiences and our perspectives. And so he realized that the only way to get close to the truth is to question everything, to challenge our assumptions, and to be open to new ideas. That's why Plato's version of justice isn't just about following rules or pleasing the majority. It's also about pursuing the truth wherever it may lead. The Sophists taught people how to win arguments by appealing to emotion, by exploiting ambiguity, by manipulating language. But Plato wanted something more. He wanted a form of justice that was grounded in reason and that could withstand the most rigorous scrutiny. And so he developed his theory of forms, which held that the physical world is just a shadow of the real world. The world of forms. The forms are eternal and unchanging, perfect and knowable only by the intellect. They are the ultimate source of all knowledge, and the standard by which all things are judged. This means that for Plato, justice isn't just a human construct. It's a real thing that exists in the world of forms. And so the philosopher king's job is to study the forms and then use that knowledge to shape the laws and customs of the state. In other words, the Sophists may have known how to win arguments, but Plato wanted to know how to win hearts and minds. He realized that the best way to do this is not through rhetoric or persuasion, but through education. The Sophists were born out of a changing world. As city-states grew and democracy spread, the old ways of thinking and being no longer seemed adequate. The Sophists were a symptom of this change, a response to the growing complexity and sophistication of Athenian society. They were the first intellectuals who made a living by selling their services to the highest bidder. They were the first people who realized that knowledge is power. And yet they were also the first to realize that power isn't just about brute force. It's also about controlling the minds of others. In a world where everyone claims to know the truth, knowing how to persuade people that your version of the truth is the only truth is just as important. Today, the sophists live on in politics, where spin doctors and lobbyists shape public opinion. In marketing, where advertising executives design campaigns to trick us into buying things that we don't need. And on social media, where the loudest voices aren't necessarily the wisest. But the sophists' ideas still have a place in our world. We still need to be able to think critically and to question everything. We still need to be aware of our own biases and the biases of others. And we still need to be able to argue persuasively. Perhaps the sophists weren't so wrong after all. Maybe they were onto something. Stoicism. What if the key to happiness is learning to suffer well? This question has endured through time because it is so profoundly human. We all suffer, but how we respond to our experiences, that's what truly matters. It is this idea that underpins Stoicism, one of the world's oldest and most influential philosophies. But wait, don't go mistaking Stoicism for a bunch of old dusty books and complicated Greek words. Stoicism isn't just a relic of the past. It's a set of practices and mindsets that can help us navigate the challenges of modern life with more resilience and clarity. Whether you're facing a career crisis, relationship issues, or just trying to make sense of the chaos around you, the lessons from Stoicism can be a guiding light. So join me on this journey as we explore the rich tapestry of Stoic wisdom and discover how its timeless teachings can enrich our lives today. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to get notified when I post new videos. Where did Stoicism come from? Let us travel back in time to ancient Greece in the 3rd century BC, where the story of Stoicism began. Our guide to this philosophical wonderland is none other than Zeno of Citium. Born in Cyprus, Zeno wasn't your typical philosopher. He started out as a merchant, but after a shipwreck that wiped out his fortune, he found himself in Athens, broke and searching for a new path. In Athens, Zeno stumbled upon the teachings of Socrates and something clicked. He became deeply interested in philosophy and started to see it not just as an academic exercise, but as a way to understand life and navigate its ups and downs. After Socrates' death, Zeno started his own school of thought, which he named the Stoa Poikile, or the Painted Porch, because it was literally the porch of a building where he taught his ideas, and that's how Stoicism got its name. At first, Stoicism was like a small neighborhood gathering, just a few folks coming together to share ideas and discuss life. But word got around about Zeno's teachings, and soon, people from all over Greece were flocking to the Stoa Poikile to learn from him. Among them was one of history's most famous Stoics, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. You know, the guy who wrote Meditations, the personal diary turned philosophical masterpiece? Yeah, him. Zeno's key idea was this: virtue is the only good. To him, being a good, honest, and wise person was the ultimate goal in life. Everything else, like wealth, power, and fame, were just bonus points if you happen to get them. But no matter what situation you find yourself in, Stoicism teaches us to focus on doing the right thing, being the best version of ourselves. And here's where things get interesting. Zeno believed that the best way to achieve this virtuous life is by controlling our emotions. Now, I know what you're thinking. Controlling our emotions, that sounds like suppressing our feelings and becoming some kind of emotionless robot. But that's not what Zeno meant at all. In fact, he had a specific term for it, apatheia, which doesn't mean lack of emotion. Instead, it means freedom from the passions that cloud our judgment. Imagine being able to stay calm and clear-headed in the toughest situations, making decisions that are wise and compassionate rather than being driven by fear, anger, or desperation. That's what Zeno was after. According to Zeno, the key to apatheia lies in understanding and accepting what we cannot change. It's about recognizing that many of the things we get worked up about are simply beyond our control. Think about the weather. You can't control it, no matter how much you complain or wish for sunshine. So instead, Stoicism teaches us to focus our energy on what we can change, our thoughts and actions. By focusing on what we can control, we free ourselves from the anxiety and stress that comes from worrying about the things we can't. It's like decluttering our minds, creating space for clarity and peace. Now let's talk about another cornerstone of Stoicism, amor fati, which basically means loving your fate. Fate, yes, even when it throws you curveballs. I know it might sound a bit depressing, but stick with me here. The idea isn't about giving up or just accepting whatever happens to you. It's about making the best of your situation, no matter how challenging it might be. It's about embracing the things that happen to you, both the good and the bad, and learning from them. It's about finding opportunities for growth and self-improvement in every experience. But why is this important? Well, think about it. When you start to love your fate, when you embrace the challenges and setbacks as part of your journey, you become more resilient. You develop a can-do spirit that helps you bounce back from adversity quickly. This mindset shift can be a game changer in your life. It's like turning a negative experience into a positive one, turning a setback into a comeback. And guess who was a master of this art? Enter the legendary Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the guy who wrote Meditations, the personal diary turned philosophical masterpiece. Yeah, him again. He didn't just write about loving your fate, he lived it. During his reign, Rome faced numerous challenges, from plagues and economic crises to wars and natural disasters. But through it all, Marcus Aurelius remained steadfast. He saw every challenge as an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to serve his people. His personal philosophy, which he shared in Meditations, was a testament to his belief in Stoic principles. One of the most famous passages from Meditations reads, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This quote perfectly encapsulates the Stoic idea of amor fati. It reminds us that challenges and obstacles are not roadblocks, but rather stepping stones on our journey. They impede our progress, yes, but they also propel us forward. They force us to adapt, to innovate, to become stronger. If you read between the lines of Marcus Aurelius's life and writings, you'll see a man who didn't just accept his fate, he embraced it. He didn't just endure the hardships of his position, he used them to forge himself into a better leader, a better philosopher, a better human being. But wait, there's more to Stoicism than just these two ideas. The third one is often overlooked, yet it's crucial to our well-being and happiness. Drumroll, please, virtue. Stoicism isn't just about enduring hardship. It's also about striving to be the best version of yourself. Being a Stoic isn't about becoming emotionless or accepting everything that happens to you. It's about finding a balance between resilience and growth, between acceptance and action. It's about being adaptable and flexible in the face of changing circumstances without compromising your core values. But how do we put these ideas into practice in our everyday lives? How can we become more like the Stoics in our approach to life? Well, here's a simple 3-step plan to help you get started. Step 1. Mindfulness. Pay attention to your thoughts and emotions. Become aware of the things that trigger you, that cause you to lose your cool. The first step to controlling your emotions is understanding them, recognizing them, and accepting them without judgment. Step 2. Action. Take action to align your thoughts and actions with your values. When faced with a difficult situation, ask yourself, what is the right thing to do here? What would a truly virtuous person do? And do that. Don't let fear, anger, or desperation dictate your actions. Instead, take a deep breath, think clearly, and act in accordance with your values. Step 3. Reflection. Reflect on your experiences and learn from them. Ask yourself, what did I learn from this situation? How can I use this experience to grow and become better? This is a crucial step because it allows you to refine your approach. It lets you adjust your mindset and become more adaptable and resilient in the face of future challenges. In today's world, the Stoic philosophy continues to resonate with those seeking inner strength and resilience. Athletes who push through pain to achieve their goals, entrepreneurs who navigate the ups and downs of the market, military personnel who face danger with courage, they are all practicing different aspects of Stoicism. But here's the million-dollar question. Could you live like a Stoic today? Could you harness the power of Stoic philosophy to enhance your mental health and overall well-being? Well, the answer is yes. You have the power to choose how you respond to the events that unfold in your life. You can choose to see the opportunities for growth rather than just the obstacles. You can choose to focus on what you can control and accept what you can't. So my friends, I encourage you to embrace the Stoic philosophy in your life. Don't just endure your fate. Love it. Embrace it. Learn from it and grow from it. Be like Marcus Aurelius, who said, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." Vedanta. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt a profound sense of wonder? In those countless stars, do you see a vast universe full of mysteries beyond human understanding? Or do you see simply beautiful lights in the sky that mean nothing to you? What if I told you that everything you see, feel, and experience in your life is just an illusion? You may think I'm crazy, but trust me when I tell you this has been the foundation of some of the most profound spiritual movements in history. In this video, we will look at Vedanta. What if you are not just in the universe? What if you are the universe? Imagine being one with everything around you, where the boundaries between you and the external world cease to exist. This idea is not as far-fetched as it may seem. It is actually a central tenet of one of the oldest and most influential spiritual traditions in history, Vedanta. But what exactly is Vedanta? How does it help us understand our place in the universe? Why does it continue to resonate with people even today? The word Vedanta itself is derived from the Sanskrit term Veda, meaning knowledge or wisdom, and Anta, which refers to the end or goal. Thus, Vedanta literally translates to the end or goal of knowledge. But what is the ultimate goal of knowledge? To find the answer, we must dive into the depths of this ancient tradition. Our journey begins in ancient India, where Vedanta finds its roots in the Upanishads. These texts, which are part of the Vedas, the oldest scriptures in Hinduism, contain some of the earliest known philosophical discussions on the nature of reality. According to Vedanta, the ultimate goal of life is to realize one's true nature, which is identical to the nature of the universe itself. This realization comes through a process called introspection, where one looks inward to discover the true self. Through introspection, one discovers the Atman, which is the eternal, unchanging self or soul. But the journey doesn't end there. Vedanta goes beyond the individual self and seeks to understand the ultimate reality, or the Brahman. Brahman is the absolute, the all-pervading consciousness that is beyond human comprehension. It is the source of all existence and the sustainer of the universe. Vedanta teaches that the ultimate reality is beyond any and all descriptions. It is ineffable, meaning it cannot be expressed in words. We can only point towards it and indicate its presence. This is where things get really interesting. Vedanta proposes that the phenomenal world, with all its diversity and complexity, is nothing but an illusion. This illusion, called Maya, hides the true nature of reality, causing us to identify ourselves with our physical bodies and the temporary experiences they provide. Vedanta says that this identification with the body and the ego is the root cause of all suffering. Why? Because when we identify ourselves with something that is temporary and limited, we become unhappy when those things change or are taken away from us. So how does one break free from this cycle of suffering? Vedanta offers a path. By realizing the illusory nature of the world and our true identity as the Atman, we can transcend suffering and attain liberation, or moksha. This state is characterized by the realization of our oneness with the ultimate reality, Brahman. In other words, we come to know that we are not separate from the universe, but we are the universe itself. Think of it like this. Imagine yourself standing on the shore of the ocean watching the waves crest and fall. Each wave is like an individual, distinct and separate from the rest. We identify ourselves with these waves, thinking we are individual entities. But what if we were to realize that we are actually one with the vast ocean from which the waves arise? When we understand this, we no longer perceive ourselves as separate from the ocean, but as an integral part of it. Similarly, Vedanta teaches that we are one with the ultimate reality, Brahman. We are not separate from it, but we are Brahman itself. But how can we be one with the ultimate reality if it is beyond human comprehension? Here is where the concept of Saguna and Nirguna Brahman comes into play. Saguna Brahman refers to the personal God with certain attributes or sagunas. People who believe in Saguna Brahman worship God with personal attributes, such as those described in the Vedas, such as the Rig Veda. On the other hand, Nirguna Brahman refers to the formless, attributeless, absolute. In essence, the concept of Nirguna Brahman represents the idea that the ultimate reality is beyond human categorization or description. It is the source from which all attributes emanate, but it itself has no attributes. One of the central figures in Vedanta is Adi Shankaracharya, who is considered the father of Vedanta. He lived in the 8th century CE and is credited with reviving and systematizing Vedanta philosophy. Shankara taught that the ultimate reality is one without a second, or in other words, non-dual. This teaching is known as Advaita Vedanta. According to Shankara, the universe is nothing but the manifestation of the one reality Brahman. He used the analogy of the dream to illustrate this idea. Just as dreams appear real to the dreamer while they are dreaming, but are ultimately seen to be unreal upon waking up, the world we perceive is also an illusion. However, unlike dreams, the world is a relatively stable and consistent illusion that persists until death. After Shankara, Vedanta continued to evolve with various schools of thought emerging over the centuries. One such school is Vishishtadvaita, founded by Ramanuja, which emphasizes the importance of bhakti, or devotion, in realizing one's true nature. Another prominent figure, Madhvacharya, founded the Dvaita school, which posits that there are two ultimate realities, individual soul and the supreme God. Despite these differences, all schools of Vedanta share the common goal of attaining liberation or moksha. Now you might be wondering why Vedanta is still relevant in today's world. After all, it's an ancient tradition that originated in India. Vedanta continues to influence various aspects of Indian culture, such as yoga, ethics, and even the caste system. Its teachings have inspired countless seekers throughout history, including Mahatma Gandhi and the Dalai Lama. Moreover, Vedanta has a universal appeal because it addresses fundamental questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and the purpose of life. Its emphasis on introspection and self-discovery resonates with people from diverse backgrounds who seek deeper meaning and understanding of their existence. Even outside of religious contexts, Vedanta has inspired global spiritual movements and influenced thinkers across different cultures. Vedanta is not just an ancient tradition confined to the past. It is a living philosophy that continues to shape the spiritual landscape of our world. Its profound insights into the nature of reality, consciousness, and the human condition remain relevant and continue to inspire seekers of truth and wisdom. Zoroastrianism. Before heaven and hell, there was a cosmic battle between light and darkness, where the fate of all creation hung in the balance. On one side were the forces of good, personified by the wise prophet Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, also known as the father of one God religion. On the other, the personification of evil itself, Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit of chaos and lies. This is how the story goes anyway. According to the Gathas, collection of 21 hymns attributed to Zoroaster, dating back some 2,500 years. Zoroaster was born into a polytheistic society, likely somewhere in ancient Persia, now modern-day Iran, sometime around the 10th to 6th century BCE. His teachings profoundly impacted three of the world's largest religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but his own religion survived for the longest. It's one of the oldest continuously practiced religions in the world. Second, perhaps only to Hinduism, which means that despite having very few followers today, less than 500,000 worldwide, it has had a massive impact on human history. So what is Zoroastrianism? What was so revolutionary about Zoroaster's teachings? And why should you care? Welcome to Epic and Ancient, according to the old texts. Before time began, there was only the one God, Ahura Mazda, also called Ormuzd, the source of all light and truth. From him emanated 6 divine attributes, 3 forces of good, Vohumana, Asha, Vaka, Hash, Kash, Man, and Anyan, and 3 personifications of evil, Angra, Mainyu, Eshma, Deva, and Druj, Nask. Together, they form the primordial, a holy council assembled before the creation of the world to determine its fate. Here is how the debate went down, according to the Gathas. Ahura Mazda told the assembly he was going to create a free and moral world, a world in which beings would be allowed to choose between good and evil, and thus determine their own destinies. But the destructive spirit Angra Mainyu jumped up and asked, "What right do you have to do this, O Mazda? You are only one, but I am many." And so, it was decided that Angra Mainyu would have his way. The world would be full of free moral agents, each capable of choosing good or evil. And when it came time to put this plan into action, Angra Mainyu caused great harm to Mazda's creation. For every good plant or animal that Mazda created, Angra Mainyu created a harmful twin. The sea gave sustenance to humans, but also brought floods. Fire warmed and purified, but could also burn. Air provided life-giving wind, but could also cause storms. Humans, the crown jewel of creation, were given free will. However, they would also be prone to evil thoughts, temptations, lies, greed, and deceit. In short, the world would be a dark place. But within that darkness, the seeds of light would grow. So the stage was set for a cosmic battle that would last for all time. On one side were the forces of good, led by Ahura Mazda, the one God. On the other, the personification of evil itself. Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit of chaos and lies. Caught in the middle were mortals whose destiny depended upon the decisions they made, which brings us to Zoroaster and his followers. To understand Zoroastrianism, you have to understand dualism. Dualism, simply put, is the belief that everything is composed of two things, two elements, two principles, or two forces. In the case of Zoroastrianism, was the belief that the world is locked in a battle between good and evil, light and dark, truth and lies. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because many of the world's religions are based on dualism. The most prominent example is probably Manichaeism, founded by Mani in the 3rd century CE, but other examples include Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and even Platonism. The big difference between Zoroastrianism and other dualistic systems is that Zoroastrianism was esoteric and didn't teach a secret knowledge. It was fully revealed, open to anyone who wanted to follow it. Now, as far as we can tell, Zoroaster himself didn't create a new system of beliefs, but instead revived older Iranian beliefs and placed them under the authority of one God. So, although Zoroastrianism is the first known monotheistic religion, it wasn't the first monotheistic system of thought. Even before Zoroaster, there were prophets like Abraham and the Vedic sages of India who had visions of a single divine reality. Zoroaster's contribution was to synthesize these various concepts into a complete system that could govern every aspect of human life. And here is what that looked like in practice. Zoroastrianism, like other dualistic systems, is sometimes called a conflict or a Zoroastrian dualism, meaning that the ultimate resolution of the battle between good and evil isn't harmonious, but violent. When Ahura Mazda made the world, he did so knowing that Angra Mainyu would corrupt it. He knew that humankind would choose evil, yet he created them anyway. That is because Zoroastrianism teaches that the capacity to choose between good and evil is what makes us human. If we were created without free will, we wouldn't be free. We'd be puppets. And if we couldn't choose evil, then we wouldn't be able to choose good either. And so the world became a battlefield where the forces of good and evil battled not just in the spiritual realm, but in the hearts and minds of people everywhere. All of human history, according to the Gathas, is a record of this battle. The primary duty of every Zoroastrian is to participate in this battle on the side of good. This idea of fighting for truth and justice still resonates today, thousands of years later. Here is what one scholar had to say about it. Zoroastrianism teaches that this world is not a static structure, but a locus of change and conflict where opposing powers contend for supremacy. One of the central features of Zoroastrian eschatology is the final victory of good over evil. In the Avesta, the word for righteous is frash, meaning victory. Thus, the term Frishka Thea, literally meaning victorious religion, denotes a religion whose message is one of confidence in ultimate triumph. But how does the world end? And how do humans achieve this victory? Well, according to the old texts, at the end of the world, there will be a final judgment. A weighing of souls, if you will, in which every human being will be judged by their actions. Those who chose good will go to heaven, where they will live forever in the presence of Ahura Mazda. Meanwhile, those who chose evil will go to hell, where they will suffer eternal punishment. But this isn't the end of the story. Zoroastrianism, like other Iranian religions, is deeply concerned with the issue of bodily resurrection. In fact, the term Messiah comes from the Avestan word Mashiach, meaning he who is about to be born, referring to the eventual return of Zoroaster from the dead. In the Gathas, the prophet describes a future age when the forces of good will be fully realized, bringing about universal peace and prosperity. This is a vision that inspired countless prophets throughout history, including Jesus Christ, who also taught about an age to come when God's kingdom would be fully realized. And that, dear viewers, is why Zoroastrianism is so important. Scholars recognize it as the first prophesied a single Redeemer, who would come to save humanity from its sins. Zoroastrianism was also the first to describe hell as a place of torment and suffering and taught the concept of the final judgment, where humans would be judged by their deeds and sent to either heaven or hell. It was the first religion to ever do any of those things. Some scholars even credit Zoroastrianism with the invention of the word Satan, which appears in the Hebrew Bible as Satan, meaning adversary or opposer. And although the exact date of Zoroaster is unknown, most scholars agree that he lived long before the biblical account of the fall of man, which means that Christian theology owes a great debt to Zoroastrianism. That's because the Book of Enoch, written around the 4th century BCE, contains clear parallels with Zoroastrianism. Both systems, for instance, feature a dualistic worldview, and both have a figure who serves as the messenger of God, another who acts as the prince of this world, and a third who acts as the accuser. The parallels are striking. Whether or not early Christians directly borrowed from Zoroastrianism is hotly debated among scholars. But there's no doubt that they shared a common worldview and outlook on the nature of reality. And that's Zoroastrianism in a nutshell, the world's first great monotheistic religion, which left an indelible mark on Western civilization, inspiring prophets from Jesus to Muhammad and laying the foundation for some of the world's greatest philosophies. I hope you enjoyed this whirlwind tour through one of the world's oldest living religions.